Hi there, we're going to be learning about the role of architecture in daily life. So you might be wondering, what is architecture? Architecture is the art and science of designing and constructing buildings and other physical structures that serve functional, aesthetic, and cultural purposes. Core components of architecture include functionality, aesthetics, structure, and context. Functionality is meeting practical needs and purposes. Aesthetics is creating visually pleasing and meaningful spaces. Structures ensuring safety, stability, and durability. And the context is responding to environmental and cultural factors. So elements of architecture design. There's many, but some include spatial elements, which is like the volume and proportion, light and shadow, circulation and flow, and then public and private spaces. Another fundamental design element is material. This includes texture and color, structural materials, whether that's stone, wood, steel, or concrete, and then sustainable and innovative materials versus local and So there's a long history of architecture. Since early civilizations, like in Egypt, we've been building different things. And so in Egypt, the pyramids were engineering marvels that demonstrated mathematic precision. There are also temples, which were cultural safe spaces designed for religious ceremonies. And they used massive stone blocks and post-lintel construction. Another early civilization that had very interesting architecture was Greece. There was Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian classical orders of architecture. There's a huge emphasis on proportion and mathematical harmony. And there's also just like democratic ideals reflected in public spaces like agoras and theaters. Another ancient civilization would be Rome. There was lots of innovation in Rome with their concrete and arch construction. Monumental buildings like the Colosseum and Pantheon were built, and they used really advanced engineering for the time, including aqueducts, roads, and sewage systems. Then, after ancient architecture, we have a period of medieval architecture with a Romanesque style of thick walls and rounded arches, small windows, fortress-like appearance, which reflected the turbulent times and how much conflict there was. There's also a big emphasis on solidarity and permanence. Medieval architecture also includes Gothic style, which had pointed arches, flying buttresses, ribbed vaults, tall windows, stained glass, and then a vertical emphasis on symbolizing aspiration towards heaven. But then there's Renaissance architecture in the 14th to 17th centuries. So this was a revival of that classic Greek and Roman principles. There was a huge emphasis on symmetry, proportion, and geometry, just like there was in Rome. And there was a big integration of architecture and urban planning. So notable architects include Brunelleschi, Palladio, and Bramante. More modern architecture movements include the Industrial Revolution, which was in the beginning of the 17th century. New materials like steel, iron, and glass were being introduced. This was the first mass production standardization. And then there's transportation of train stations and bridges. And a lot of people say this is the first time architecture became less focused on aesthetics and more focused on functionality. Then there were modern architecture movements like Art Nouveau. This reintroduced organic forms inspired by nature and integration of decorative arts and the rejection of historically revival styles. And so this is actually in Barcelona, Spain. But this building was designed just more for aesthetics than previous buildings had been. Another modern architecture movement is modernism. Key principles include form follows function by Louis Sullivan, minimal ornamentation, open floor plans, large windows, international style, universal design principles. This is much more common in houses in modern day America. And then there's also postmodernism, contemporary architecture, which is a reaction against like the modernist simplicity. It's a revival of historical reference and ornamentation. It's more playful and electric design. And then it's also context selective and sensitive. As the world continues to develop, we now have seen a rise in also digital architecture, which is computer-aided design and parametric modeling. This can be seen in like Times Square with all the different lights and billboards, but it's complex geometric forms. And there's smart building technologies, and then just visual augmented reality is being introduced into these design processes.